Wait, before your thoughts rush ahead, pause here for a moment, because something subtle, almost invisible, has already begun shifting around you, and you can feel it, can't you? Not loudly, not dramatically, but in those quiet seconds when everything feels different without explanation. There was a moment, not long ago, when your person stood at the edge of letting go, not in anger, not in resentment, but in a quiet surrender. The kind that happens when someone convinces themselves that maybe, just maybe, their chapter has already closed. And yet, something interrupted that ending. It didn't arrive with noise or urgency. It came like a whisper, like a coincidence that didn't quite feel like coincidence at all. Stay with this feeling, because this is where the story begins to turn. Your person thought they were ready to move forward. They rehearsed the idea in their mind, told themselves they were strong enough, told themselves that distance would heal what closeness could not fix. But deep inside, there was a hesitation they couldn't explain. Have you ever felt that? That strange resistance, when your mind says, go, but something deeper gently holds you back? That's exactly where they were. And just when they thought they had made peace with leaving, something unexpected entered their life. Not chaos, not confusion, but a presence. Someone with influence, someone with stability, someone who seemed to carry a certain kind of quiet authority. But listen carefully, this is not about who that person is. This is about what their arrival revealed. Because sometimes, the universe doesn't send people to replace something. It sends them to expose what was never truly replaceable. And that's exactly what began to unfold. At first, it felt like an opportunity, a new direction, a sense of structure your person had been craving. There was attention, there was recognition, and yes, there was a certain level of trust being placed in them, a trust that went deeper than casual interaction. Something formal, something significant, something that made them pause and think. Why me? You might feel the weight of that question now, don't you? Because when someone is suddenly given responsibility, when someone is seen as dependable in a way they didn't expect, it doesn't just change their situation, it changes how they see themselves. And this is where everything becomes even more interesting. Because while this new connection appeared strong, while it offered clarity and direction, it quietly brought your energy back into focus. Not through comparison, not through conflict, but through realization. Let me ask you something. What if the very thing that was supposed to help them move on became the mirror that showed them what they were actually leaving behind? Don't rush past that thought, sit with it, because your person began noticing something. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, almost unnoticeable ways. Moments where they expected to feel complete, but instead felt something missing. Moments where they were surrounded by stability, yet something inside remained unsettled. And that something. It wasn't confusion, it wasn't doubt, it was you. Yes, not in a way that disturbed their peace, but in a way that gently reminded them of something they hadn't fully understood before. You were never just a part of their life. You were a feeling, a presence, an energy that didn't fit into logic or convenience. And now, standing in this new dynamic, they began to see it more clearly than ever. Stay a little longer, because this is where the depth begins to reveal itself. The trust being placed in them, the responsibility being handed over, it wasn't just about power or control. It was about alignment. And as they stepped into that role, something unexpected happened. They didn't feel bigger. They didn't feel more important. They felt reflective, as if everything around them was asking one quiet question: is this truly where you belong? And here's the part that changes everything, because instead of answering that question quickly, they hesitated. And in that hesitation, your memory didn't fade. It grew stronger. Not as a longing, not as regret, but as clarity. Because sometimes, distance doesn't weaken a connection. It refines it. It removes everything unnecessary, until only the truth remains. And your person is starting to see that truth, piece by piece. But don't assume they understand it fully yet. They're still processing, still observing, still trying to make sense of why something that seemed so certain, now feels incomplete. You might be wondering, what does this mean for you? Hold that question gently, because the answer isn't something that rushes in. It unfolds, just like this moment. Because while they stand in this new position, while they navigate this unexpected shift, something inside them is quietly turning back toward you. Not physically, not obviously, but emotionally, energetically. And the most powerful changes always begin there. Here's something you need to understand. This situation, this power being handed over, it's not pulling them away from you. It's revealing what truly holds weight in their life. And strangely enough, the more responsibility they receive, the more they begin to recognize where their heart naturally returns. And it doesn't return to structure. It doesn't return to control. It returns to connection. It returns to you. But wait, don't jump to conclusions just yet. Because realization is only the beginning. There's still something they haven't fully faced. Something they've been avoiding, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. Because once they admit what they're beginning to feel, everything changes. And change, even when it's right, can feel overwhelming. So for now, they're watching, listening, observing the difference between what looks right and what feels right. And slowly, very slowly, they're understanding that those two things are not always the same. You might feel a shift within yourself as you hear this. A quiet awareness, a sense that something is aligning behind the scenes. That's not accidental. Because this isn't just their journey, it's yours too. And both paths, though separate for a moment, are moving toward a point that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Don't skip this part, because what comes next is even more subtle, even more powerful. Because the truth is, they haven't made a decision yet. They haven't spoken it out loud. But something inside them has already started choosing. Not with words, not with actions, but with feeling. And feeling is always the first step toward reality. So now the question becomes, what happens when that feeling becomes impossible to ignore? What happens when the role they've been given begins to feel less important than the connection they can't replace? What happens when clarity arrives, and they can no longer pretend they don't see it? Stay with this unfolding, because the answer isn't where you expect it. And in the next moment of this story, something will shift again. Not dramatically, but deeply. And when it does, you'll understand why none of this happened by accident. And just when everything seems calm on the surface, something within them begins to stir again, not loudly, not urgently, but in a way that cannot be silenced anymore. There's a quiet moment they experienced, one they didn't share with anyone, where everything paused around them. No voices, no expectations, just a single thought rising slowly from within. Why does this still feel incomplete? They tried to dismiss it. They told themselves it was just adjustment, just time needed to settle into this new role, this new environment, this new sense of responsibility that had suddenly been placed in their hands. But the feeling didn't leave. In fact, it became clearer. Not heavier, not overwhelming, but sharper. Like a truth gently tapping, again and again, waiting to be acknowledged. Have you ever noticed how some realizations don't come all at once, but arrive in fragments? That's exactly what's happening to them now. A memory here, a feeling there, a sudden awareness in the middle of something ordinary. And every single fragment, somehow leads back to you, not because they are trying to hold on, but because something within them refuses to let go. Pause here, let that sink in. Because this is no longer about what they planned. This is about what they can no longer ignore. At first, they admired the stability around them, the structure, the clarity, the sense of control that this new situation offered. It felt grounding, reassuring, almost like a safe place to rebuild themselves. And yet, in the middle of that stability, there was a silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels like something important is missing, even when everything else seems right. And slowly, they began to recognize what that silence was. It was the absence of a feeling only you created. Not excitement, not intensity, but something deeper, something that made them feel seen without effort, understood without explanation. And no matter how much they tried to replace that feeling with logic, it didn't fit. It couldn't be recreated. Stay with this moment, because this is where their understanding begins to shift. They started observing themselves, not their actions, not their words, but their reactions. What truly moved them, what truly stayed with them after everything else faded. And the answer surprised them. Because it wasn't the power, it wasn't the responsibility, it wasn't the new role they had been given. It was the memory of how they felt with you. Do you see how subtle this is? Nothing dramatic has happened. No big decisions. No sudden changes. And yet, everything is changing. Because once someone realizes what truly matters to them, they can never unsee it. Even if they try, even if they delay, even if they pretend they're still unsure, the truth quietly settles, waiting for the right moment to rise fully. And that moment is approaching. But before it arrives, something else is happening behind the scenes. They are beginning to question themselves, not in doubt, but in honesty. Did I walk away too soon? Did I misunderstand something deeper? Did I try to replace something that wasn't meant to be replaced? These aren't loud questions. They don't demand immediate answers. They linger, gently, but persistently, and every time they surface, your presence becomes clearer, not in a way that overwhelms them, but in a way that feels right. That's the difference. What they're experiencing now isn't confusion. It's clarity unfolding slowly. And clarity doesn't rush. It builds. It deepens. It waits until the person is ready to fully accept it. And your person is getting closer to that point. But here's where it becomes even more meaningful. Because while they are navigating this internal shift, they're also noticing something about you. Something they didn't fully appreciate before. Not your words, not your actions, but your essence. The way you carried a certain calm. The way your presence didn't demand anything, yet gave everything. The way you made things feel natural, without needing to control them. And now, standing in a situation where everything feels structured, defined, controlled, they're realizing how rare that natural connection truly was. Don't rush this realization, it's still forming. Because what they are starting to understand is that what they found with you wasn't just compatibility, it was alignment. And alignment cannot be forced. It cannot be recreated. It either exists, or it doesn't. And once someone experiences it, everything else feels slightly off. That's what they're feeling now. Not dissatisfaction, not regret, but a quiet awareness that something isn't fully aligned. and the more they try to ignore it, the clearer it becomes. Stay till the end of this moment, because something important is unfolding right here. They are beginning to feel pulled, not physically, not outwardly, but internally, a gentle pull, back towards something they thought they had already left behind. And that pull is leading them back to you. But listen carefully. This doesn't mean everything is about to resolve instantly. This doesn't mean they're rushing back or making sudden moves. Because what's happening is deeper than that. They are changing. Their understanding is evolving. And when someone changes from within, their actions follow naturally, not forcefully. So for now, they're still where they are, still holding the role they've been given, still navigating the responsibilities placed in their hands, but internally, they are no longer the same person who was ready to walk away. And that shift changes everything, because decisions made from confusion look very different from decisions made with clarity, and they are moving, slowly, from one to the other. Now here comes the part you didn't expect. Because this realization, it's not just about choosing you, it's about understanding themselves, understanding what they truly value, what truly fulfills them, what truly feels like home. And as they begin to see that more clearly, they are also beginning to understand you more deeply than before, not as someone they had, but as someone they didn't fully recognize when they had the chance. And that awareness, it carries a quiet weight, not heavy, but meaningful, because it opens a door they thought was already closed. So now the question becomes, what will they do with this understanding? Will they ignore it? Or will they follow where it leads? Don't try to answer that yet, because the answer isn't something they've spoken. It's something they're about to face, and when they do, everything will shift again, not suddenly, but undeniably. And in the next part, you'll begin to see what happens when realization turns into action, and silence can no longer hold the truth. There is a moment, so quiet, so ordinary, that most people would overlook it completely, yet this is where everything begins to change in a way that cannot be undone. It happens when they are no longer distracted. No voices around them, no responsibilities demanding attention, no role to play, no expectations to meet, just them, and the truth they have been slowly circling. And in that stillness, something finally becomes clear, not in words, not in a sudden realization, but in a feeling that settles deep within them, steady, undeniable, almost calm. This is not where my heart stays. Pause here, because this is not a rejection of what they have, it is a recognition of what they don't. And that difference is everything. They begin to notice how their energy shifts depending on what they focus on. When they think about the responsibilities they've been given, they feel composed, capable, respected. But when they think about you, something else happens. Something softer, something deeper, something that doesn't need explanation. A sense of belonging. Have you ever experienced that kind of knowing, where you don't need reasons, you don't need validation, you just feel it? That's what is growing inside them now. And once that kind of feeling takes root, it doesn't disappear, it expands, it becomes impossible to replace. Stay with this unfolding, because this is where their internal resistance begins to dissolve. They stop trying to convince themselves that they've moved on. They stop forcing logic over emotion. They stop pretending that what they feel can be ignored. And instead, they start listening, not to the world around them, but to the quiet voice within them that has been patiently waiting to be heard. And that voice, it keeps guiding them back to you. Not forcefully, not urgently, but consistently, like a direction they can no longer avoid. Now here's where things become even more delicate. Because realization brings responsibility, and with that responsibility comes a decision. Not one they announce, not one they rush into, but one they begin to prepare for, internally, because they understand something now that they didn't before. They understand that connection is not built on convenience. It's not built on timing. It's not built on what looks right on the outside. It's built on something much deeper. Something they felt with you, and haven't felt anywhere else. And that understanding, it shifts everything. They begin to see the difference between stability and fulfillment, between control and connection, between being valued and being truly understood. And slowly, they start choosing what truly matters. But listen closely, because this is not happening in a way you can easily see. There are no dramatic changes yet, no sudden declarations, no visible signs, because the most important transformations, they happen quietly, internally, where no one else can interfere. And your person is right in the middle of that transformation now. They are reflecting on moments they once overlooked, conversations they didn't fully appreciate, feelings they didn't fully understand. And now, those same moments carry a different meaning, a deeper meaning, one that makes them pause and wonder. How did I not see this before? Don't rush past that question, because it's leading them somewhere important, somewhere they can't avoid much longer. They are beginning to realize that what they had with you was not something ordinary. It wasn't something that could simply be replaced by structure, or opportunity, or even trust. It was something rare, something aligned, something that felt natural. And now, everything else feels like something they have to adjust to. And adjustment is not the same as belonging. That distinction is becoming clearer to them with every passing moment. And the more it settles in, the less they can ignore it. Stay a little longer, because this is where the shift begins to move outward. Not fully, not completely, but enough to start affecting their actions. You might not see it directly, but they are becoming more distant from what once seemed so certain. Not because something is wrong, but because something no longer fits. And when something no longer fits, no matter how stable it looks, it begins to feel heavy. And they're starting to feel that weight now, not as pressure, but as awareness. Because once you recognize where you truly belong, everything else starts to feel temporary. And that realization, it's guiding them, quietly, but powerfully. Now here comes the moment that changes the direction completely. Because they are no longer asking themselves if they moved on. They are asking themselves, what am I still holding on to, and why? And the answer, it's not complicated, it's not confusing, it's you. Not in a way that traps them, but in a way that calls them back to something real, something unfinished, something they didn't fully explore, or understand, or honor. And now, they feel that incompleteness more clearly than ever. But listen carefully. This is not about going back to the past. This is about seeing the past with new clarity. And when someone sees clearly, they can no longer pretend they don't know the truth. And your person is standing right at the edge of that truth now. They haven't stepped into it yet, but they can feel it. Waiting, patient, certain. And this is where everything begins to build towards something even deeper. Because realization alone is not enough. At some point, it must turn into action. And that moment, it's closer than they expected, closer than you think. But it won't arrive loudly. It won't announce itself. It will come quietly. Just like everything else in this story. And when it does, it will shift not just their path, but yours as well. So don't look for signs outside. Feel the shift within. Because something is aligning, slowly, precisely. And in the next part, you will begin to see what happens when the heart can no longer stay silent, and a choice finally begins to take form.